Welcome to a self-published author's diary. I am Elodie Novodatsky. I write about first times, second chances, things that scare the crap out of me, and things that make me laugh out loud. I'll be speaking with you and sharing my adventures in self-publishing, the behind the scenes of writing, and the business side of it. And before we get started today, a small message from our sponsor, Anchor. Thanks for listening. Today on the podcast, I am very, very happy to have Penelope with me. We recorded this episode on April 22nd, I think it was. A little bit more about Leslie. Leslie has been writing since she could hold a pen and loves getting lost in the worlds in her head. She is an award-winning author of fantasy and paranormal romance. Leslie lives in Maryland with her husband and their furry dependents. Sign up for new release information and giveaways on her website at www.elpenelope.com. Talking about giveaways, I am hosting a giveaway to win one copy of the book of your choice by Penelope. You can see the giveaway link on this episode's description or on my website at www.elodienovodatsky, N-O-W-O-D as dog, A-Z-K-I-J.com. And you will want to win one of Leslie's books. She is the author of the Earthsinger Chronicles series, the Eternal Flame series, the Cupid Guild, and short stories and anthologies. The first book in the Earthsinger Chronicles, which is called Song of Blood and Stone, was selected as one of Time's top 100 fantasy books of all time. And the editors and panel picked the list based on originality, ambition, artistry, critical and popular reception, and influence on the fantasy genre and literature more broadly. About Song of Blood and Stone, they said, the romance is fresh and fun to read, and Penelope's world building is a feat to watch develop throughout the book. I've read that book, I love that book, and I agree with the times. So again, you will be able to win a paperback copy of the book of your choice by Penelope by just entering the giveaway. And now, without further ado, here's the chat that we recorded on April 22nd.
Hi, Leslie. How are you doing?
I'm doing really well, Elodie. Thank you so much for having me on.
Yes, thank you so much for being my first. I mean, my husband will hear this and say, I was your first interview, but
of course,
I'm honored and I'm very grateful because I've mentioned several times on this podcast that really listening to yours has been an inspiration, but also has kept me company. So thank you for keeping me company.
I'm so happy that you started a podcast. That's really amazing. I really like listening to it.
Thank you. It's exciting. So in case you do not know, Leslie, I'm going to let you introduce yourself. I met Leslie via Maryland romance writers a few years back. I can't remember actually when, but it was quite a few years ago, probably 5 or 6 years ago, maybe even 7 years ago.
Something like that.
Yeah, it's been a while. The Baltimore Book Festival, I think, was the first time we've actually met in person. She's also been very helpful throughout my career, whether she knows it or not. Because she has shared her experience via the Maryland Romance Writers. And we used to have a self-pub also group at some point. Mm-hmm. And Leslie had shared about how she got her books into library, and she shared about her writing experience, her self-publishing experience. And I know I've learned a lot from you, Leslie, throughout the years. And so thank you for that as well.
You're welcome.
And your writing, and I've mentioned that before, actually, the Song of Blood and Stone, I don't know if you get in those moments sometimes where you can't get into a book and you can't read, no matter what the book is. And it's not the book's fault. You're just not in the mood to read anything. And yet you want to read and you can't read. And it's frustrating as a reader and a writer. And Song of Blood and Stone actually got me out of one of my reading slump.
Oh,
So
that's so good to hear.
it was great. Like it was just very, very good. And I was so excited when you've mentioned that it was picked up by a publisher. And I have one of the original covers of it, like your
Oh,
previous one. So
the
yeah.
extra special original self-published version.
Yes, I do have that's like a collector's edition now, I think.
Right, exactly.
So do you want to say a few words about yourself before we start?
Sure. Yeah. I write fantasy and paranormal romance, and I've been writing forever since I was a very, very small child. And then I was always on like literary magazines and really interested in writing my whole life, but I didn't think that I could make a living at it. And so I ended up getting, going to school, getting a master's degree in multimedia, and I work as a website developer. And then after I got married, I got back into writing to a new place where I didn't know anyone, and I work from home. So I went to these writing classes as just a way to meet people. And so within a few years, I was writing stories again and trying my hand at a novel. Song of Blood and Stone was actually the first novel I ever finished.
Oh wow.
And yeah, well, I have a couple of unfinished like trunk novels that I hope
Mhm.
to finish one day. Like I haven't completely given up on them, but we'll see if life gives me enough time. But yeah, while I was writing it, I was researching self-publishing, and I was really interested in the DIY thing because I had a lot of other kinds of DIY experience and other art. And so I'm also a control freak. And so doing it myself, self-publishing just made the most sense. And so as I was learning and trying to take my skills from like multimedia and website development, and I had also started a literary magazine that I published and edited, and I did the ebooks and the print books. So I had a lot of those skills already that I could put into it. And yeah, it was great. And then with the Maryland romance writers, three of us had gotten together to form this sort of group for the self-publishers because at the time, RWA, Romance Writers of America, was still a little bit antagonistic towards
Yeah.
self-publishing.
Yeah.
And different groups were better. I think Maryland was better than a lot of the other groups,
Mhm.
but we still felt like we needed our own place to share all of the information that we were all learning and experiencing. And so I was really happy to give back because throughout the course of my career, there's been lots of people who've helped me, and it was a lot of fun to be able to meet and share all those experiences. And then when I became hybrid, I still wanted to self-publish. I just wanted to have like all the experiences. I wanted to know what it was like. And I was hoping to learn from the publishers and bring it back to self-publishing and still do both, which is basically what I'm doing. I'm still, doing both and really enjoying doing both because they're both really hard and they're both rewarding in different ways.
That is true. And I'll definitely ask you more, I think, a little bit later about that, what you've just said about, bringing what you're learning from traditional publishing into self-publishing, because that's also very interesting. How do you pronounce your author name?
So I write as L. Penelope. My name is Leslie Penelope James Reeves. When I got married, I just added a new name onto the old one. I chose, so L. Penelope is what I write as. It's funny because when I was younger, I was like, oh, my pen name is going to be L. Penelope James. It's basically my name, but I spell my name differently. I spell my name, it's Leslye, and no one in my whole life has ever been able to pronounce it. I mean, to spell it, they can pronounce it just fine, but to spell it consistently, correctly. And, even cousins, people who've known me my whole life will spell my name wrong. And so my thought process was, I'll just use the L because I wasn't trying to hide my gender. I was really just thinking about the search. And, oh, if they search my name and they spell it wrong, because they always will, then they won't
Yeah.
find me. But of course, speaking to you, like you have no fear about that. And I feel like, oh, well, just go for it. Just make them spell your name, like, make them figure it out. And there's something in that too, where it's just like, I don't know. I respect you a lot for doing that and for like being like, no, this is my name and you're going to figure it out.
Well, thank you. But I have to say, I don't know if that was the brightest idea I've ever had to actually go with my real, like, Novodatsky is my married name. It's my husband's name, and I took it. I started actually when I was still working in. I used to work as a press officer, and my name when I got married, I tried to hyphenate it, so it became like Elodie Lafitte Novodatsky, and it
Ah,
was just super long. I was kind of like, that's just a very long name,
right.
and it did not change. But I didn't want, because I had some academic publications under Elodie Lafitte. I'm like, I don't want to lose that. And if I change to
Mhm.
Novodatsky, then what's going to happen? And I was like, oh, Elodie Lafitte Novodatsky is just way too long. So yeah, I changed it to Elodie Novodatsky, and when I decided to self-publish, I'm like, I'm just gonna keep my name. And then I went into it very, I think, blindly or
Mhm.
also very naively, thinking like, oh yeah, I've done my research. It's gonna, it's gonna go great. And it went okay. It did not go great. And then I was kind of like, somebody was teaching me afterwards about like, oh yeah, no, I'm using, so and so name because it's so much easier in terms of the, search engine optimization. And it's so
Mhm.
much better in terms of people finding you on Amazon because at least they know how to spell your name. And I've tried like to misspell my name and see if that works on Amazon, and it doesn't.
Okay.
So like it doesn't in English. Like in French, I think it actually does work, which is weird, but I think it's
Huh.
because my books in French do much better. So maybe Amazon is like, oh, we probably should direct them to that lady who has that very complicated Russian Ukrainian name. So I don't know, like, but now I'm standing by it. Now it's kind of like for several
Yeah.
reasons, and one that you've mentioned, where I'm kind of like, you know what? I've heard so many times that people cannot say my name and
Right.
my first name or my second, like my last name.
Mm.
And I'm kind of like, well, it was spelled that way because when my husband moved from Russia to Germany, the translator, when they did the Cyrillic translation into the Western alphabet,
Mhm.
it used to be translated with IJ at the end instead of just an
Oh.
I. But now, if he would move now, it would get translated as an I. And when we got married,
Oh.
the German guy asked him, like, hey, do you want to change your last name the way it's spelled? Because now my husband's like, no, no, thank you. Like, it has now been my last name since I'm 8 years old. Like, no, I'm not changing now
Right?
because
Yeah,
so
there's something to be said about, just having your name be your name and making people pronounce it correctly because it's not outside of like the human ability to say these letters and these sounds. It's not like clicks and pops, and some languages have clicks and pops. But people, at least in America, are very like, oh, I can't possibly pronounce that. And I mean, to me, it's like, yes, you can. If you give it a little bit of effort, you can pronounce this name, and it's not a big deal.
I've heard that in Europe as well.
Oh,
So,
really?
yeah, not for like my first name. My first name is like all good, but for the Novodatsky, because of the IG at the end, it's just very it's a lot of
Mhm.
letters. Talking about pen names. So I do have pen names for like things that I've published that like my parents are not going to read. Uh, do you have any pen names otherwise, or like do you write anything else that, I mean, you don't necessarily have to publicize the pen name. You don't want other people to know, but do you use another one?
I did co-write a book with one of my very good friends, and we never quite finished it. So like we got a good draft, and then we both moved on to other things. And so she had wanted to release it. I think she put it on Wattpad and she published it to her newsletter. And I was like, I'm not quite happy enough with it to use my name.
Okay.
So I had come up with a pen name for if I ever wrote like erotica, which I don't think I
Yeah.
will, but I was
Uh-huh.
thinking, oh, this would be a cool name. So it's Cecily St. James. And it's like a play because Cecily sort of rhymes with Leslie, and then James was my maiden name. And so nothing is actually published under that, except possibly on Wattpad and maybe in someone's newsletter for the story that, like, I just thought it needed another couple of passes. I'm a perfectionist, and my co-writer is not so much of a perfectionist. So it's
Okay.
probably fine. It was just like, I would feel better if you
If we
publish it
use
under this extra name. But I doubt I'll ever publish anything under that name because my dreams 10 years ago of writing erotica just fizzled when that's just not what I'm interested in writing.
Yeah, and it just takes time. Like everything just takes time. Like you're like it's just I think if we had so much more time on our hands, like maybe there would be so many more
Right.
pen names out there.
Yeah.
But it's
And
hard to like I think you talked about it in one of your last podcasts about like the muse and business and like trying to decide where to go. So I'm sure that plays a role too.
it definitely does. Yeah, it's like there's business decisions that I could make and do things differently. But I always think about why I'm writing in the first place. And, I still have a job. I own my own business. So
Yeah.
it doesn't have to support me. And so I can make decisions that might not be as sound, like business wise. Like, yes, I'm possibly leaving money on the table here, or I could make more money if I did X, Y, and Z. But I'm also writing to fulfill something inside of me that just wants to write what I want to write and not worry so much about the business. And then, try to balance it so that I'm still writing things that I hope other people will want to read, but it's still fulfilling the need within me.
Yeah, that's a good point. And the need, well, okay, I need to keep on. I sent you questions ahead of time, and I'm going all over the place. All right. So, in a few words, what is the most challenging part about the book you're currently working on, and the one you most recently published? And what do you love about the book you're currently working on and the one you most recently published?
So I'm currently working on a paranormal romance that I've worked on and off for 5 years, mostly off. And I'm coming back to it, basically starting from scratch. So the hardest thing right now is I really kind of, I know I've got all these great words that I loved that I wrote 3 or 4 years ago, but I told myself that I'm not going to go back to them. I'm doing everything from scratch because whenever I've tried going back to them in the past, it has not worked out. And it's like a constant reminder. I'm like, I know I wrote these descriptions before. It's mostly with descriptions because I really dislike writing descriptions. And part of me wants to go back and mine that content just for the descriptions. But I also know I'm going to get distracted by everything else. And it just really doesn't work. And I've tried so many times. So I'm just trying to hold fast. Now, the book I most recently published was Cry of Metal and Bone in the Earthsinger Chronicles. The hardest thing about that was it has the most point of views of any book in the series that far. So books 3 and 4, I'm bringing in everybody. And that book was a struggle on a number of levels, but managing a large cast of characters in an epic fantasy, and everyone has their own arc and everyone's kind of doing their own thing, but pacing and, just that juggling act. I think someone described it as playing 3D chess, and it just made a lot of sense to me because that is really difficult. And I just had a hard time kind of keeping all the balls in the air and bringing them down when they were supposed to come down and all of that.
And what's the thing you most enjoy about
the current book? What I really enjoy, I just love this world, and it's something a little bit different for me. It's so it's kind of paranormal romance, but I wanted to be like a futuristic fantasy. And I love the story. I love the world. It's been on my mind for all of these years, which is why I'm coming back to it. And it's really nice to be able to sink into it and give it the time that I haven't been able to, because I've tried to squeeze it in between other projects, and that's why it's not done. So now I'm kind of just focusing on it. And then the favorite thing about the book I just published, I love so much about Cry of Metal and Bone. It's hard because it's like when you're in the middle of writing, a lot of times you have so much doubt and you're like, oh, this is terrible. Why am I doing this? Who do I think I am? And when I finally get to the point at the end, when I'm happy with it, it's just amazing. It's like, I did my best with that book. I mean, of course it's not perfect. Nothing is, but I don't know what my favorite part is. I feel like it came together. Like after all the struggles, when you feel like you did it and it came together and it's how you envisioned it, that really is one of the best things about writing.
Yeah, when all the pieces finally get together. I find that very interesting that you said that and it's full disclosure, it's a bit hard for me to not jump on things because I listen to your podcast and I know my listeners may or may not listen to your podcast. So I want to make sure that I don't jump ahead and start talking about oh yeah, I know you talked about that paranormal romance and the world building and how it's going to be different than your fantasy one because the world may not have as many, people and layers and all that stuff. So
right.
And it's very hard not to jump onto things. But what I found very interesting too is the description part, how you say, and I've heard you say that before, that you do not enjoy necessarily writing description. And I find that very interesting because in the first of the Earthsinger Chronicles, in the Song of Blood and Stone, I was very impressed by how visual it was to me when I was reading it. And so it was interesting to then hear you saying oh, this is not one of your, favorite things to write, because to me, it was a very visceral experience reading the book, and because of the senses and everything. So yeah, just I don't know if I'm looking for like, how do you do that when you don't like it?
Well, I mean, it's good to hear, and thank you. I think that I was a film major in college. And so when I'm writing, I do see everything playing out and I try to write it the way I see it. And I do
Okay.
think about, I kind of talk about like moving the camera in and out with your perspective and your point of view, because you can zoom in and get really detailed and zoom back out. And so for me, that's not necessarily a description. I think visual writing incorporates a lot of things, but I don't feel like I spend a lot of time on, what color is this and what's the texture of the
Yeah.
wall, or, detailed
Yeah.
descriptions of people's clothing or the way they look. So I think that the visual writing comes in other areas. Because I do have to go back and be like, okay, did I describe anything about this room? I want to make it so that you can kind of see it, but then you're on your own. Like you can envision it how you want to envision it.
And maybe that's what it is, like maybe leaving the imagination a little bit because I don't know if the reader necessarily realizes, maybe I'm wrong, but like, when you're in a box, when the things has already been described like to the teeth, and some readers would love that. Like they want to be able to have the texture of the wall. But I'm wondering if your reader, and as a writer, descriptions are, I think, not my forte. So I usually when I read, I do picture everything like a movie. Like I do, and even for my own writing, like right now I have scenes in my head, and like I'm seeing the scenes, but I'm not seeing like the spot on the wall that may need to be covered. I just see it as like there's not a zoom in on certain parts of the landscape or anything. It's just a whole. So maybe that's why when I was reading your book, I was just able to see it as a movie. Maybe that's why I was like thinking it was very visual to me when I was reading it. So maybe it's
I think, different readers are looking for different things because, there's some readers who love description. I skim it when I read in books generally. So it's just like, okay, if this resonates with you, then maybe my style just resonates with you. And it's awesome to hear.
Definitely. I mean, I really enjoyed it. So I also very enjoyed, by the way, I haven't told you I read that yet, but I started reading your, the Cupid Guild series.
Oh,
the short
I love that series. Yeah.
I've started reading for those of you who do not know, that is paranormal romance short story, and I've started reading the first one, and I highly recommend it. It's very good because I was looking for something shorter to read. Like sometimes my attention span was not for like, let's read something like long and get like all of that, and I just wanted a short story. And I stumbled upon yours because I think maybe you talked about it on Instagram at some point. I can't remember. And so I went on Amazon and got myself the first copy and thoroughly enjoyed it. And I'm actually going to I think I already have the second copy on, like the second short story on my Kindle. So I'm excited about that.
Thank you. Yeah, I have a short attention span too. And I tend to write long. Like all of the Earthsinger Chronicles books are at least 130,000 words. So that's no good if you just want something short. But I had originally written these short stories for a magazine, and then I republished them myself. And they're cute. I love them so much.
Yeah.
They were fun to write, and they're delightfully paranormal. There's a little bit of magic in there too.
I know, and they're delightful to read. Like it's just a very nice, like, I don't know, I'm really enjoying, at least I really enjoyed the first one. So I'm looking forward to the second one.
Oh, thanks.
Going back to the self-publishing and traditionally published, especially because now you talked also that the Cupid stories were into a magazine. I know your books at the beginning, at least Song of Blood and Stone, and I think the second one too, right, were self-published before they became traditionally published.
Yes.
And you've mentioned before that you're trying to bring things from the traditional publishing world maybe into self-publishing when it comes, I'm guessing, towards, my dog is just the worst.
Oh, it's okay. We're lucky my dogs aren't barking too. So it's part of the podcast. It's part of the,
it's
the aesthetic
of my life. Yes, I wanted to know what has felt like the most different, and not necessarily better or worse, because sometimes I know we put things into categories like, oh, this is better, this is worse. Not necessarily better or worse, but between your self-publishing experience and your traditionally published experience.
Yeah, they're not having the control in traditional publishing is, the thing that you have to get used to. You realize that you're giving it up and, ideally you're working with professional people who care about your book and really want it to succeed. But it's a business. It's a big business, especially if you're with a big five or even one of the larger small presses. And so not knowing when the cover is going to be posted. Like, I wanted to do a cover reveal. Oh, well, it's already up. Like, oh, okay.
Oops.
Communication has been the most difficult part and the difference because there's so many people involved. And I guess, yeah, they're just, things that get dropped in terms of communication. So I don't know when things are happening. Like I'll find out that there's a sale just sort of randomly because I have alerts coming up on my name in my books and, those type of things. And everyone's experience at, traditional publishers is different. Some have much better communication. I've just found that's been the most frustrating thing. But I also really enjoy the fact that there are a number of people, like I have a publicist there. And so I'll ask her, oh, can we do this and this? And she'll make suggestions also. So there's people who have a lot of experience and are bringing that to the table and have connections, with bookstores and, in terms of doing events, like, yeah, sometimes I will try to contact certain people and they don't respond to my email, but they'll respond to someone from St. Martin's Press. So that's always cool. It's opened up additional opportunities for like speaking at conferences that I wouldn't have gotten self-published. Just because I think that people are trying to, I guess, gatekeep or filter. There's so many books, so many authors. So some people have chosen to filter only traditionally published authors, and it's not necessarily quality. It's just like, we can't look at everybody. So we'll look at these people. And I've appreciated that. But yeah, I still like having the control and of the self-publishing, even though it's so much work. You're juggling so many things and you're responsible for everything. Yeah, all the hats. And I feel like I'm never quite doing all of them that well. And some of them completely fall off the radar. Like I haven't promoted my books in a long time, my self-published books, because there's a lot of reasons, but I just haven't felt like it. And it's just not been a priority for me, which is shifting. I'm trying to a lot more time to marketing my self-published stuff and focusing on it and trying to feed that a little bit more. But it's hard when you have so many things going on.
Well, and you're also, as you said, you're also working. You still have your own, your business, and
Right.
I'm sure trying to also, have I don't want to say have a life outside of writing, but do like different things too that are not related to writing. So it's I'm sure your husband also wants to spend time with you, and you have a dog and a cat.
2 dogs and 2 cats, and they are very
needy. 2
needy.
dogs and 2 cats?
Yes.
I need to catch up on your social media. Like, you must have talked about them and I missed it.
I don't post that much on social media, so it's easy to miss. Like, it's another thing that kind of falls by the wayside of like, oh, I should post more. And then 2 weeks later, I haven't posted anything. So
Which, by the way, dear listeners, and if you want updates on Leslie's books and when she's gonna, finish this paranormal romance she's currently working on, you can also like sign up for her readers newsletter, and you get a short story when you do. Aren't you? Penelope.com.
Yes.
And then you can sign up for her readers newsletter. That's the best way to get the publishing news before everybody else. So,
and you get a welcome video when you sign up. Also, I do little welcome videos for everyone.
That is cool. Did I get one? I'm like, wait.
It depends on when you signed up. I started it like at a certain time, but if you were before that, you might not have gotten one.
I'm gonna have to double check my welcome email. I remember the short stories. So I don't know. I can't remember when I signed up. So when it comes to, I asked you, before doing this little episode and interview, and I need to stop calling them little. I call about my little book, my little podcast. They're not little about this episode and this interview. I asked you 3 words about writing, and I'm wondering what 3 words would come to your mind now if I'm talking to you, or if you think about publishing and self-publishing. Like, what 3 words would come to mind for that?
I think business, patience, and professionalism would be my 3 words.
You almost got an alliteration this time.
I know. I almost got the other one too. I'm always 1 word shy of alliteration.
I know. And I will actually just now play the answer that Leslie gave me about 3 words when she thinks about writing.
Hi, My name is Penelope, and I write fantasy and paranormal romance. I'm also the host of the My Imaginary Friends podcast, where I give you a weekly behind-the-scenes look of my life as an author. My first book is Song of Blood and Stone, and it is the first of the Earthsinger Chronicles epic fantasy romance series. When I think of writing, the first 3 words that come to mind are perseverance, plotting, and keyboard. And those really were the first 3 words that came to mind. I thought I was going for an alliteration thing, and they would all start with P's, but keyboard came in there, and I went with it. Keyboard, because I don't write by hand, and I haven't gotten into dictation, so I wouldn't be able to write without a keyboard at this point in my life. Plotting. Plotting is one of my favorite things to do and to talk about. I collect plotting systems. I like to pull them out when I need them and use them like tools in a toolbox. Some stories need a certain plotting system, and other stories need a different one. And sometimes the same story will need multiple plotting systems at different points. And of course, perseverance, which you need for when you're actually doing the writing to finish the book. And when you get into author concerns, publishing, whether it's indie publishing or traditional publishing, perseverance is one of the most important skills a writer can have. Thanks.
Going back, so in the writing, you talked about perseverance and you talk about plotting, for example, in keyboard as well. So those were the words that you used. What plotting techniques would you recommend? Or what is the last one you're currently using that you think people should check out?
I always start with, these days, well, I shouldn't say always. I start with Save the Cat, and there's 2. I can't pick one. And the Dan Wells 7-point story structure. And they kind of go hand in hand, even though they're a little bit different. So if you only, 7 points is very easy. I think Save the Cat is 11. So maybe start with a 7 first, and then if you get stuck, you can, or if as you get more information, you can go further into it. Save the Cat has books, the original book, which was for screenwriters. And then there's Save the Cat Writes a Novel. I believe there's one for TV writers and other types of writing as well. But those 11 beats make a lot of sense to me. But sometimes I'll try to start there and I'll get stuck on the second or third one. I'm like, this is too many. I'm going to go back to the 7-point plot structure from author Dan Wells. And I created a spreadsheet for that. So I kind of go back and forth. Me and my plotting is very chaotic because I don't stick to one system. That's why I like to collect them and have more and more to choose from.
Do you use Scrivener?
I do. Oh yes, I must use Scrivener.
Okay.
I adore Scrivener.
I have I think I'm using, there is one for the romance beats, and then you can mix that up with another one. And so I mix a lot of plotting. I've become somewhat of a plotter more. And I think 2 weeks ago you were talking about also plotting the series for your paranormal romance, trying to do for the business side,
right.
Do the series part. And I know I'm trying to do that with the current romance rom-com that I'm almost done revising. And I'm finding that actually less stressful than I thought it would be.
Oh, good.
So I don't know, because I know for me sometimes I get but I don't want to be stuck. What if the story changes? What if the story thing changed? But I'm kind of okay, but I can just have it doesn't have to be super detailed. So I can just be okay, the second story will be about this sister and this guy. And then I can figure out what their big problem is a bit later on if I need to, but at least have something that I can put forward.
The plot doesn't have to be handcuffs. You're not required to follow it. It's always going to change. It's more just a blueprint. And then if you're, you have the blueprint, and then you kind of decide, what if the sunroom is over here? Well, I can just change it. But you had the plan up front. And so it shouldn't be stressful. And it can be a few paragraphs, a few sentences, one sentence, or 11 pages, depending on what you think you need and what you feel comfortable with.
Yeah, that's very true. And I think it does help you write also about marketing and everything else. So, that's something I'm trying to keep in mind too. So yeah, I'll keep on listening to your podcast and see if you have any other
brainstorms
advice. And then you've mentioned too, like in your writing, words perseverance. And I think it was in the same episode actually that you talked about celebrating milestones and the happy moments, and that you
Mhm.
had a cheesecake, like a
Oh,
New
yes.
York style cheesecake. From what I understand, you do not want anything on your cheesecake, not cheesesteaks.
Nothing but cheesecake. Don't give me any syrup or chocolate or strawberries. I just want cheesecake.
And totally. I mean, I do like things like Oreos and raspberries and strawberries. Like that's I'm all for that. But I also understand that celebrating milestone and goals. I mean, I think it really helps
Mhm,
keeping up with perseverance.
mhm.
And I think like you have patience in terms of publishing and self-publishing, and you have perseverance, which you also said is important in both writing and publishing. And I really like that because sometimes we also forget that even if we do not, like, even if a writer decides for whatever reason not to pursue publishing,
Mhm.
just writing a book takes perseverance, like no
Oh,
matter what end
yes.
goal you have with it.
It's so hard. Like sometimes, at least once a month, I'll look up and be like, this is really hard. Why am I doing this?
It is very hard. And I think sometimes we're so stuck into talking about how, or maybe it's like maybe the impression, that writing is such like it's such a creative outlet, and it is. Like I know it helps keep me balanced, and I think you've mentioned that too in like maybe a
Hmm.
month or 2 months ago, about how it helps, like you don't see yourself not writing because it helps, but writing is also very hard.
Yeah.
And I think it's just important to note that perseverance, I think, is indeed key. And I was wondering, like, does having a schedule, because you say you write every morning, I think at 8, right, or almost
Hmm.
every morning at 8, does that help you like, have you see a change, or have you always had a schedule for writing?
I have not always had a schedule, and having the schedule has helped so much, and having the accountability because, I tried, and at various points, if I'm under a deadline, then I will, just sit down and do it. But if I'm not under a deadline that's externally imposed, it was hard to get my butt in the chair. And
Yeah.
so, because I write with a friend on Google Meet, 5 days a week, basically at 8 a.m. And I know she's going to be there and she knows I'm going to be there. It helps to have the accountability and to have someone expecting me to be there. Um, because, yeah, discipline is difficult. And I feel like at different points in my life, I've used up all the discipline I have so that I got to hear it. And I'm like, I don't have it on my own. I need other people to help me, to keep me honest. So, but having the schedule has made all the difference in my productivity and being able to produce a lot of things. Yeah.
I Again, like it's nice to, and I don't know if maybe others will have the same reaction, but I know for me it was nice to hear like that reminder, because I know it's advice that you read in books, and that's advice that you sometimes get when you listen to conferences and things, like how it is
Mhm.
important to show up. And I I just remember how when I heard that, it was a reminder to me as well to like just put my butt on the chair and write. Because if I'm not there to write, then I won't get those moments. And I didn't like, now I put my book for pre-order. So I do have like do have a timeline. But
Ooh.
before that, it's kind of like, well, yeah, I need to get it done, and I'm writing and I'm doing other things, and I'm trying to, I also have like other part-time ventures, so to speak.
Mhm.
Just trying, I think, to get back on track has been very helpful. And for me, your podcast has also helped with that. So that's
Oh, thank
just
you.
that's just great. So I have one last question for you.
Okay.
What is one moment of your author and writing career so far that whenever you think of, you smile?
I it's funny. I was at a signing and I am a violent introvert. But I do like talking to people, even though it's draining. But at a signing, and so it was actually New York Comic Con, and I was at the Macmillan booth, and so there
Uh-huh.
was actually a very small line of people waiting for the signing to begin.
Which is cool.
And which was nice, yeah. Because my friend's like, "Oh, look, we have a line." I'm like, "Well, it's 5 people, but it's a line. Yes, let's go with that." Well, and signing books and just kind of having that one-on-one, because we're alone so much of the time. We're in our offices or in our homes or cafes, wherever we write, and being around readers and people who are excited to read the book always puts a smile on my face. And that one moment sort of where there was a little bit of a line there, it kind of just made me happy. And you think back on those times when it gets hard, when you doubt yourself and you have the imposter syndrome that we all have. And you're like, well, I put a smile on someone's face and they were excited to read the book, or someone had read the book and told me they were excited about it. But yeah, that helps a lot.
That is great. And I'm glad it helps you too when you're like, because that's kind of why I mean, I'm planning on finishing all the interviews with that question, because I think that we all have, as you said, like the imposter syndrome, and we talk about how hard it is. And I think part of the perseverance too, right, is try to hold back to those moments that actually made you smile. And it's because when we write and it's with the reader, we always say like, okay, now I'm done writing it and it's not my world anymore. It's the reader's world and everything. Right. And it's true when it comes to reviewers and everything else. But at the same time, it's something that we wrote. And I think seeing that people are excited and seeing them and maybe getting emails or stuff like that really does, I think it really does help that we're not only writing in a vacuum and then poof, that's gone.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And since I don't read reviews, I can't bring myself to do that anymore.
I still do.
A little masochistic, maybe. I don't know.
Yes, but on my side, probably. It's just like I try to see the silver lining in them. Like I have like a 1-star review on Amazon that's like the top for Summer Like No Other, and it has like a few likes, but like it says it's the worst book they've ever read. Yeah, I mean, and then it's okay. In one way, I've done something that no other author succeeded with. I mean, it's like,
well, you can't. That is the silver lining, I guess. Yeah.
It's like, wow, I am that not talented or that talented. I don't know. But it's also like it hasn't stopped. I think what I have learned through like the 7 years of publishing now is that everyone is entitled to their opinion. I've never replied to any review. Will never reply or engage with a reviewer. Right. And when I think you're very, like when you're a baby author and it's your first book out and you're, at least I know I was like that. Like I had dreams and hopes about my book just being picked up out of the blue and becoming a movie and like all those things. And the reviews came in and some of them were not good and some of them were not wrong.
Yes, that's true. I mean, you can learn something from the reviews because there are things to agree with, and you're like, I guess you have a point.
Yeah, I guess. I mean, I wish I didn't read it, but yeah, I guess fine. So I do not. Like I do no longer go and hunt for reviews in the sense that I don't go and become like every day, or let me check, or what my rating is, or what is this, or what is that. I usually don't. I sometimes do use it for marketing. Right. So it sometimes says like, oh, this was the worst book I've ever read. It sounded like I think somebody said it sounded like a Danielle Steele movie. And I'm like, okay, like a Danielle Steele book. I'm like, sure. Or
yeah, use it. Absolutely. And the thing about reviews is, that they help people find the books because people who love Danielle Steele were like, yeah, hey, I'm interested in this. So
exactly.
Yeah. Grain of salt.
Yes, but your line, I think, at the book signing is awesome, and it's. I'm glad that you have that moment too, that you can just. I'm sure you had plenty others, but that this one also can be like a little bit of a light when you're struggling and you're like, I had that line. Now I'm going to keep on writing that one sentence that's just is a description that I do not want to write.
Exactly. You just push through and remember that shining moment, and I'll get to the other end of this description.
All right, Leslie. Well, thank you so much for your time. One last thing. When is your next book releasing? Can you give us just the blurb of it?
Sure. So the final book in the Earthsinger Chronicles comes out in August 17th, 2021. It is called Requiem of Silence. And it is the epic conclusion. We have a battle of the dead that is trying to destroy the living world. And our heroines, who we've met through the other books, are trying to stop that from happening. So it's not a standalone, but it's where I've been going for the past, 7-8 years that I've been working on this series. So I'm very excited to finish it, to have the big conclusion and have it in the world.
This is exciting. Well, thanks again so much for joining me.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for listening. As you can probably as you can probably could tell, I thoroughly enjoy talking to Leslie and about, writing, how hard writing is, how rewarding it is, about self-publishing and those moments that make us smile. When I was listening to the audio again, I've noticed there were two parts that when I was talking, it was a bit muffled. I don't know if it's because I was holding my phone too close to my mouth. I have no idea. But when it comes to A Summer Like No Other, when I was talking about the 1-star review, I wanted to say that it did not prevent people from buying the book. As I said, once you release a book, the book is with the readers. And yeah, so it's also easier not to be as fazed by reviews, if, first of all, if you remember that, yes, it's with the readers. I mean, you give it your best and then it's the readers review the books. And it also sometimes doesn't stop people from buying the book. So, and the other thing, talking again about reviews, is that when I was talking about 1, 2, 3, I wanted to say that I read the reviews, that was at the period of my publishing career where I was reading reviews. Everybody said, do not read the reviews, and I was still reading the reviews. And yes, I still do sometimes today, but back then it was a lot to take in. For like a new writer, it was just a lot. And some of the reviews were not good and some of them were right. So, it's all about, I think, also growing as an author and maybe also growing as a person. Anyways, again, thank you for listening to this episode with Penelope. And as I've mentioned, I have a giveaway. I will give away one of Penelope's book, whichever you want to read. You can check the episode's description for the link, or you can go on my website, www.elodinovodatsky.com. As always, happy writing if you're a writer, and happy reading to everyone.